The death toll in Iran continues to climb on the sixth day of repeated U.S. and Israeli attacks. The Iranian Red Crescent Society says at least 1,200 people have been killed, including 165 students at a girls' school on the first day of the war. Today, a top UN official is saying the strike demands an investigation.
There will need to be accountability for those who are responsible for these deaths.
And U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is investigating the incident. Joining me now from Cleveland, Ohio, is Michael Scharf, Associate Professor at Case Western Reserve University School of Law. He specializes in international criminal law and war crimes. There have been calls, Professor, for this to be investigated. And when we heard the Iranian ambassador to the UN speak recently, he spoke of war crimes and crimes against humanity. How do we know if what has happened here at the school in Iran constitutes a war crime?
Well, Carolyn, they hit the school in the morning when the school was in session. They killed 165 girls. And indiscriminate bombings is a war crime. Targeting a school is a war crime unless the enemy is using it to house soldiers or weapons. And the only defenses that they possibly have are, one, that the United States didn't do it, but Israel did. But I don't think that they're going to prevail on that because the United States has been concentrating on the south of Iran, and that's where this school was, while Israel has been concentrating its fire on the north of Iran. The second defense is that the school was adjacent to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard facility. There are 6 buildings that are all in the same block, and all 7 buildings, including the school, were demolished. And the school was only separated by a wall from the Revolutionary Guard. So they could say that this was collateral damage, that in order to hit a good target, they unfortunately had to also hit the kids. That's probably not going to be a good defense. And then the final one is it's a mistake because only purposeful attacks are war crimes, and they could just say, you know, we had bad data or the missile went astray. But it was a precision missile. So I don't think any of their defenses are going to be very strong.
Do you think that's actually plausible, that they would say 165 school-age girls are collateral damage? That is mind-blowing to me.
Well, yeah, that's a very large number of innocent people.
No kidding.
And, you know, if this target was a super important target, command and control, they might make that argument. But I think this is just a bunch of Revolutionary Guards hanging out down in the south of Iran. So it's not going to be a strong argument.
But so far, we've heard both the United States and Israel say, we didn't do it, we'll look into it, but we don't target civilians, which is a fair defense, and they shouldn't target civilians. But is there any concern that this is fabricated? I mean, in an era of misinformation and fake news, is there any concern that the images, one, may not be real and that it may not be U.S. and Israel responsible for this? Or has this been verified at every level?
I think so far it's been verified. But one of the things that Iran is likely to do is invite the UN to come in. And if the UN feels it's safe enough to do the investigation, they'll do it. You've already heard UN officials say that they're very eager to have this investigation. You know, the problem, Carolyn, is there's nowhere to hold anybody accountable for this. The United States and Iran are not parties to the International Criminal Court, so they can't be indicted by The Hague. The International Court of Justice isn't going to have jurisdiction over this. And I don't even think you could win in a civil lawsuit in the United States because of something called the political question doctrine. So I think even if they decide that there was a horrendous mistake or an accident or just a bad thing that happened, the only thing they can do is name and shame. There won't be actual criminal accountability.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying then, Michael. There are no rules of engagement, at least none that have any consequences in a case like this. 165 girls at a school could die, and there would be no consequence to that.
You know, the International Criminal Court has 125 parties. And if this happened in one of those many countries, there would be consequences. But Iran didn't want to become a party. The United States has not been a party, nor is Israel. So, no, the International Criminal Court isn't going to be able to act. And I don't think U.S. courts are going to be able to act. I suppose it's possible that a European court or even a Canadian court could someday bring an indictment if they could figure out who actually was responsible for firing these missiles, and they would use something called universal jurisdiction to prosecute.
Can the global community not press for more accountability?
It's, you know, international law is limited. And although we have these institutions like the International Criminal Court, international law is consensual. And so when countries like the United States refuse to join the court, it means that unless they're doing something in one of the 125 state countries that are parties, then they're off the hook. And so, no, there are limits to international law, and we're seeing them here.
What do you think is going to happen with this case next? Is this something that as the war goes on, people will forget about? Or given how significant the loss of life is here, do you think this is something that people will hold American or Israeli feet to the fire on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it then becomes a political issue. In the United States, this is called Trump's war. It's very unpopular. And as these kinds of things happen, it becomes less and less popular. And if the Republicans eventually decide to join with the Democrats and say enough is enough, now they didn't last night. There was a vote and the Republicans hung together. But there are cracks in that cohesion. And it's this kind of event that makes those cracks widen.
Michael Scharf, such an important issue. We truly appreciate your time on a day like today.
It's a pleasure, Carolyn.
Michael Scharf, professor at Case Western University.